They're not showing up on the screen. There.
Well, we can go on mute for now, letting people come in.
Something wrong with your image. Can you lean a little closer to me?
It keeps kind of fading in and out.
I don't know why.
Everybody should be on mute right now.
Mute, yes.
Thank you.
We can put two out a little bit safer.
Greetings, everyone. I want to thank everyone for participating in the side event in preparation for the third meeting of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. And we want to thank the designer and curator of that video, Mr. Hassan Shahidi. He did a great job of presenting often unspoken of and unrecognized heroes of the reparations movement. And part of the themes that I got from that was our collective unity, self-determination, and the continuation of our struggle. The purpose of this meeting is a preparation for the third meeting of the Permanent Forum, which will be held the 16th through the 19th in Geneva, Switzerland. And part of the forum's program is to have side meetings held by civil society organizations. And AFRE, All for Reparations and Emancipation, is a UN NGO with roster status at the United Nations. We have been a UN NGO since 1997. And today you'll hear from our founder, Ida Hakeem, and our emeritus members, the Honorable Silas Muhammad and Queen Mashaki Muhammad, also known as Harriet Abubakar. They were the first to work and establish all for reparations and emancipation. Currently now, I have been asked to lead and direct the NGO as of August of 2023. And I'm pleased to have our board members here today to present with us, as well as our special guest, Mr. Eric Phillips, who is here representing CARICOM. We have our special guest today. And we also have attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz, who will be giving a special message via video. And we also have the president of the Afrodescendant Nation, Dr. Akilah Mukarram. So we have a great panel today, as well as Dr. Tahita Brana, who is here today. She is also a member of the Afrodescendant Nation, who is a coordinator of this event and has been providing information for this forum. What the forum will like from this panel, at the end, we will summarize recommendations for the forum as the forum concludes its first 10 years as a UN-sponsored forum. And as we begin, or as the hope is to begin another 10 years for the forum to engage in its work in supporting Afro-descendants, also identified as people of African descent. So let me start by first talking about our mission for AFRE. We first submitted a 1503 procedure for reparations for African Americans here in the United States. In many of our interventions, we identified ourselves as African Americans. The United Nations Commission on Human Rights, its subcommission on the promotion and protection of human rights, and its working group on minorities, recognized the unique concerns that we had in the UN being recognized. And this being as a result of violations of the slave trade, colonialism, institutional slavery, de jure and de facto racism, discrimination, forced assimilation, and ethnocide. Through the work of the UN, and we began first working in 1992, led by attorney Harriet Abubakar and the Honorable Silas Muhammad. The UN sought to connect African Americans with other members of the slavery diaspora who sought protection as well and recognition of their human rights under different names, under Afro-Latino, Afro-Peruvian, Afro-Brazilian, Afro-Cubano, other names that were reflected the identity of the people in the states in which they live. Those were minority peoples in those states. We were people who lost our identity. We lost our language, our culture through the transatlantic slave trade. And yet we chose self-determination, or chose to self-determine as minorities in those states in which we were domiciled. We chose the UN as our place to gather ourselves and to seek identification and recognition. The United Nations, through the Working Group on Minorities, sought to include us with other peoples by coordinating special workshops and seminars to support our efforts of self-determination. In his 1408 2002 report, that's his August 14 report, the Subcommissioner on Human Rights, Dr. Ide, urged states in the Latin American and Caribbean region to ensure full and free participation of indigenous peoples, Afro-Latinos, African Americans, and other vulnerable groups in all levels of decision-making processes. The Subcommission on Human Rights Resolution 2002 notes that it marked the 10th anniversary year of the adoption of the Declaration on the Rights of Persons Belonging to National, Ethnic, Religious, Linguistic Minorities, and noted the holding of the first seminar of Afro-descendant issues in the Americas that was held in La Ceiba, Honduras, from 21 to 24 March 2002, and recommended that follow-up meetings be organized 2003-2004. The UN, in its documents and statements, recognized Afro-descendants as the people's self-chosen identification to gain recognition, as well as collaborative and collective support with other Afro-descendants throughout the diaspora of the Caribbean, North, Central, and South America that shared common political objectives. Throughout our participation in the United Nations, we have called for a forum for descendants of slavery in the diaspora. Most notable, the Honorable Salis Muhammad, as leader of AFRE, in point number 4 of his oral and written statement. This was in South Africa at the World Conference Against Racism. He suggested that the forum will provide an environment where the gravity of the current situation can be examined and the extent of damages can be determined. Within such a forum, the victims can discuss and conclude on the means of reparations most beneficial to their restoration individually and as a people. In 2006, at the request of the Subcommission on the Promotion and Protection of Human Rights, All for Reparations and Emancipation submitted a working document entitled A Regional Perspective on Afro-Descendant Quality of Life, which is a permanent paper of the United Nations. This UN document further recognized the identification of Afro-descendants in the various states in which they live, some numbering 200+ million throughout the diaspora, as well as call upon reparations as a remedy for crimes against humanity, which was recognized by the United Nations through the Durban Declaration and Program of Action. Citing other examples of self-determination, Afro-descendants have exercised their human rights and have democratically organized the Afrodescendant Nation, demonstrating the political will of the people while also taking upon themselves to repair matters and concerns amongst our own people. We understand that the term people of African descent does include Afro-descendants. However, we do note our unique concerns that were originally addressed in the Subcommission on the Promotion and Protection of Human Rights and the Working Group on Minorities, that descendants of slaves in the diaspora have unique circumstances because of the loss of language, identity, culture, and religion while enduring centuries of colonialism, institutional slavery, apartheid, racism, and discrimination, and its lingering effects that continue even to this day. Police brutality garnered through the support of state and federal governments continue to this day. Education, undermining of land and finance also undermines self-determination to this day. Inadequate healthcare systems negatively impact the quality of life for Afro-descendants to this day. Voter suppression, lingering effects of plantation slavery today impacts the quality of life of Afro-descendants. The Afro-descendant nation seeks reparatory justice in the form of full and complete reparations. We ask that the permanent forum supports our efforts to organize and educate so to improve the quality of life of Afro-descendants. We also, or me personally, I like to cite an additional contemporary issues that reoccur even to this day. The persistent legacy of plantation slavery manifests in expanding wealth gap between Black and white households. As of September 2023, Black households owned only 23.5% of the wealth of white households in America. This gap continues to widen due to the exploitation of land, homes, and communities, often facilitated by policies favoring corporations over Afro-descendants who frequently fall victim to practices such as redlining and blockbusting. Unfavorable financial policies and limited protection hinder the accumulation of generational wealth through land ownership and acquisition. In 1970, 2 years after the passage of the Fair Housing Act, the national home ownership for Black households was 41.8%, barely increasing in 2019. Only 1.2% increase to a 9.2 increase for white households during that same time. Neighborhoods inhabited by Afro-descendants are disproportionately labeled as blighted, leading to decreased property values and facilitating eminent domain seizures for properties like highways, often devastating the socio-economic patterns and fabrics of these communities. Part of the recommendations that we are submitting, and we would like each of our panelists to forward recommendations, which we will gather and support in our final report. Part of the recommendations that we as AFRE are urging the UN in this forum to take upon is that we urge states to take immediate executive action. And we talk about states, we're talking about the United States of America, France, England, all the slave holding states, nations, to take immediate executive action to address reparations, reparatory justice for Afro-descendants. We advocate for the prioritization of restitution in the form of land as a component of reparatory justice for Afro-descendant people. We call upon nation states to formally recognize the global identity of Afro-descendant people and to ensure protection of their human rights. We urge that the permanent forum support the inclusion of Afro-descendant people as a working group or a permanent agenda item in the second decade of the permanent forum on people of African descent. And we encourage nation states and global partners to support the self-determination of Afro-descendants by expanding economic development programs in regions where Afro-descendants reside. So these are the recommendations that AFRE has submitted, and we will submit and add as a part of this forum. But as we move forward, I'd like to thank everyone for participating, all our panelists and the persons that are participating in this forum today. I'd like to introduce and bring on a gentleman who I have worked with side by side for many years. He is also a governing board member of AFRE, All for Reparations and Emancipation. He has spent several years in the UN. He is also the first president of the Afrodescendant Nation. And he will talk a little bit. I asked him to talk about those moments in Honduras and those moments that he participated in that led to the recognition of Afro-descendant people, and he can summarize any recommendations to the permanent forum. And that is Mr. Akilah Mukarram. How are you today, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you, Ishmael Abdul. I will be brief. I was asked by my brother to present really what I call a historical perspective of the work of the Honorable Salis Muhammad and Mrs. Mashaki Muhammad. They have worked diligently for the years. And so let me start at this point. Around 1988, I became familiar with the Honorable Silas Muhammad and his work while a student there in Tuskegee University. And my wife and myself began traveling from Tuskegee to Atlanta on a weekly basis. And at that time, we were going through what's called an orientation process into the Lost Found Nation of Islam. And we became members in 1990. And around that time, I saw Mr. Muhammad shift a large percentage of his time and his mind power to the plight of Black people here in the United States of America. And during that time, he began to talk almost every time I heard him speak about reparations for Black people. And he did it in such a manner that he became known as the leader of the Nation of Islam that had the reparations platform. Well, he at the time had his wife start to work, or they started to work on venturing into the United Nations. And at the time, we did not have our own platform in which to engage in the UN. And so Ms. Mashaki Muhammad reached out to, his name is eluding me now, the brother there that worked in Canada. Help me.
Dr. Cly.
Dr. Cly, thank you, Dr. Cly. And so we started working with Dr. Cly, and we were learning how to do business out in the United Nations. And the Honorable Silas Muhammad said to his wife that we should work on having our own NGO. And so she's on the call today. Ida Hakeem actually formed an NGO, and kind of a funny story. At the time, she formed the NGO as CURA, Caucasians United for Reparations and Emancipation. During the year around 1999, there was talk about a Millennium Forum in New York City. Mr. Muhammad had already started going to the UN and working with the working group, working on the rights of minorities. And he told myself and Ishmael Abdul Salam to prepare to go to the United Nations Millennium Forum in New York City. It would occur the next year in the year of 2000. And we went there as members of CURE. And we had business cards, and we began to talk. And as we handed out the business cards, there was chuckle from the people that received the card, said, "You two brothers not Caucasian." And so thus you have now all for reparations and emancipation. Ida Hakeem changed the naming of the NGO to All for Reparations and Emancipation, and not just Caucasians United. But in that Millennium Forum, when Ishmael Abdul Salam and myself were there, as we heard people speak, you really had to be registered to speak before the UN. There was a particular space on the main floor with an empty mic, and it had the name of the nation, Senegal. And I said, well, I'm Black. I told Ishmael that I'm gonna go and take the seat there at the table where Senegal is represented. And I did. And I was called on with a distinguished member from Senegal. You recognize, would you stand and speak? And I stood up and I told them that I was a member of the Lost Found Nation of Islam, and that my leader, the Honorable Salis Muhammad, had been venturing out to the UN, working with the working groups on minority, and that he wanted those of us in the United States to know that we needed a forum that would unite Black people throughout the slavery diaspora, and we needed to put our plight on the ears of the world. It was well received. Although I wasn't from Senegal, they really heard what I had to say. So from a historical perspective, let me tell you, the Honorable Salis Muhammad was asking the working group to sponsor United Nations sponsored forums for, I'll use the term, Afro-descendant people throughout the slavery diaspora. And they started sponsoring these forums. And Mr. Muhammad asked me to travel to several of them. And so if you take a look at the Millennium Forum that started in New York City in early 2000, which we participated in. Following that, there was another UN-sponsored forum that took place in Quito, Ecuador. And let me just tell you a little bit about each trip. While in Quito, Ecuador, I started hearing about the plights of different indigenous groups. And one that really comes to mind is the Mapuche Nation. It was a indigenous people there in Quito who still had, they were speaking Spanish, but they still had their mother tongue as well that they spoke. And that was part of the forum, but they also talked about worldwide there being plights similar to the people, the Mapuche tribe people. And they were talking about Blacks in America, Blacks throughout the slavery diaspora, and it was really intriguing. We took a field trip to this old church. And in the church, there was a painting of Mary and the baby Jesus. Yet the depiction on this picture was quite different than anything I'd seen in America. There, they depicted Mary as a woman of color, a really dark complected color, about my complexion. And the baby Jesus that she held was my complexion. And I went, whoa, this is different. And I took note of that. And in my report to Mr. Muhammad, it was one of the things that I reported, that people abroad have a different perspective on Mary. But that's another story, just a bit of that. The next treaty that came out was a Millennium Multilateral Treaty that was written and took place in September 6th through the 8th of 2000. And then one of the major United Nations sponsored forums for Afro-descendant people took place in Santiago, Chile. It took place, and I remember it well, December 5th, and it went on for about 3 to 4 days. I think December 5th through about December 8th. And during that time in Santiago, Chile, that is their summer season. And so the sun stood and didn't set for a long time. And December for contemporary Muslims is Ramadan. So I was on Ramadan and the sun was setting about 8 p.m. at night. I didn't have the good sense then to know that I was traveling, that I could relax my Ramadan, but I went from early in the morning until about 8 at night, not having any food. But when I met Jose Bengoa was one of the persons. He was one of the UN specialists working on the rights of minority. Mr. Muhammad had mentioned his name several times. And when I heard his name, I ran up to him and I said, my name is Akilah Mukarram. I'm here from the United States, and I came here to deliver a message on behalf of the Honorable Salis Muhammad. He said, the Honorable Salis Muhammad And he embraced me. He said, I'll make sure that you get an opportunity to speak. Part of my mission at the time was to go there and let the United Nations know that we were a people lost from our identity, and that we needed recognition in the UN, and that we needed a name to recognize us. At the time, the Honorable Silas Muhammad says, since we were lost and we were found, we should put forth that message that maybe we should be recognized as lost, found people. And the way you should couch it is, not only are we lost here in America, we speak English and we follow the culture of the Anglo-American and their religion. And in the Latin American countries, although we are Black people there, they speak Spanish and they follow the culture of the Latino Anglo-Saxon and their culture. And in Brazil, they speak Portuguese. And so I had this laid out, and I was so engulfed in we were lost, found people that I missed in the documentation that everyone there was calling the Latinos, especially Latin American Black folk, were calling themselves Afrodescendants. They were saying that they were Afro-descendant people. Well, I did bring back all of the paperwork. And inside of that, Mr. Muhammad recognized that a certain group of Latin American Black people were calling themselves already as early as December of 2000, Afrodescendant. And so shortly after Santiago, Chile, we had another Millennium Forum that took place in Montreal, Canada. And this time, Quito, Ecuador, I traveled alone. Santiago, Chile, I traveled to alone. But I went to Montreal, Canada with Mr. Muhammad. He was my travel partner. And he was tutoring me as I got prepared to speak. And I went up on the stage in Montreal, Canada, and I put forth pretty much the plight of Black people throughout the slavery diaspora. And I began to talk, and I began to state that we had lost our identity and that we needed a name to collectively call ourselves. And I put forth that Mr. Muhammad recommended that perhaps we could be called lost, found people. And then the attacks began to fly. Lost, found? I'm not lost. I'm born in Detroit, Michigan. I'm not lost. I'm born right here in Toronto, Ontario. I'm not lost. I'm born in Montreal, Canada. I'm not lost. I'm born in Chicago, Illinois. And Black people really weren't ready to hear the term lost, found people. So Mr. Muhammad, in his wisdom, began to look at this term more closely, Afrodescendant. And I think he started to gravitate toward it. No, Mr. Muhammad did not initiate the term Afrodescendant. As I told you, it was already being used as early as December of 2000 in Santiago, Chile, by a number of our Latino brothers and sisters who looked just like me. But in order for us to speak together, we had to have a translator. And the United Nations did provide translation and interpreters during these forums so that I could hear what they were saying in English and they could hear what I was saying in both Portuguese and Spanish. After the Santiago, Chile forum, there was this big forum in Durban, South Africa that took place August 31st through September 8th, 2001. Where Mr. Muhammad and a contingent did attend, and Mr. Muhammad was able to talk there. And then after that, the major one, and I'm going to wrap this up. One of the major ones was La Ceiba, Honduras. And it was there in La Ceiba, Honduras that Mr. Muhammad and Queen Mashaki Muhammad and others of the contingent on a napkin decided that they would accept the term and acquiesce and accept the term Afrodescendant with the definition. I won't give you the definition. I will leave that to some of our other speakers. And after La Ceiba, Honduras, we met in Chincha, Peru, November 2005, and a large contingent of us went. We flew into Lima, Peru, and we were driven on buses to Chincha, Peru, and had a wonderful time uniting with other Afro-descendant people. And at that time, we had all accepted the term Afro-descendant, and we celebrated as Afro-descendant, and we toured, and we even saw a place where our people were unloaded on the ship and walked underground for miles into what was called a big plantation, a hacienda. And even down in those vineyards, we saw even bones. It was eerie to know that our ancestors were dropped off and walked. And so with that, I want to recognize the Honorable Silas Muhammad for his diligent work, starting years ago with the publication of the 1503 resolution and all his multiple interventions in Geneva, Switzerland. He and Queen Mashaki Muhammad and Ida Hakeem traveled with them several times. And President Akilah and Ishmael Abdul Salam traveling internationally to work on the rights for Afro-descendant people. And with that, I applaud you, Mr. Muhammad. I applaud you, Queen Mashaki Muhammad, for your diligent work. And thank you, sir, for asking for these forums and giving me a chance to talk about our historical perspective. Thank you for allowing me the time. Hopefully I have not been too long-winded, and I'll turn it back over to our CEO of All for Reparations and Emancipation, Ishmael Abdul Salam. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny, for giving that historical perspective for Afro-descendants. It's key that as we lay the claim for recognition, that we understand the historical perspective which gave way for the global identity of Afro-descendants and how it reached North America. It's very, very important that that be said. And I'm going to go straight forward and introduce and bring forth the Honorable Silas Muhammad and Queen Mashaki Muhammad, also known as Harriet Abubakar. And I want to open just with this part of the question that Mr. Muhammad asked that at this time is, where do we fit? That rang a bell throughout the UN. Where do we fit? We're here, but where do we fit? Greetings, Mr. Muhammad and Queen Harriet Abubakar. The floor is yours. Please unmute yourself.
Please unmute yourself.
All right, well, let me start this over again. Welcome to all of our listening audience. Assalamu alaikum to those who are of the Muslim family. Bonjour to those who are in Geneva. I, again, am Harriet Abubakar in my professional role. And my husband, back in late '89, asked me to start to get ready to go out into the international arena, that we needed to let the people of the world know our position and our problems here in the United States. So, Harriet, I want you to go out to the United Nations. I said, what? I said, I have studied law, but they didn't touch on the United Nations, so I know nothing about the United Nations. Well, I want you to go out there and learn something about the United Nations. So I said, all right, husband, I'll see what I can do. So I'm going to put a little meat on the skeletons that we've already put out there about how we got started in the United Nations. And it might be funny to some of you, but I went over there by myself at first. And I had planned on staying a while, so I took 3 big suitcases, dead body kind of suitcases. And I was expecting to get some help in the trip. Well, guess what? That doesn't happen over there. So I was on my own struggling with these suitcases. I managed to balance all 3 of them on the escalator in Geneva, going up to the main level. And I got a little tap on my shoulder. And a young white man said, "You don't have to do all that." I said, "What do you mean you don't have to do all that?" He said, let go of your suitcases. And so I said, now, should I listen to him or what? And I decided, all right, let's give this a try. I eased my pressure off the suitcases and they stayed in place. And it was an amazing thing to see. And I said, well, this is off to a good start. So I went from there, and I had already made arrangements to receive some training for the UN before I left. And it was being given by the local council of churches that is there in Geneva. So at this setup, they were basically training us in how to lobby. And they let us know that what we would do is meet in meeting groups and work the crowd, so to speak. Let people know who you are, what your cause is, what you're about, what you're trying to accomplish. This was the working grounds for the UN. This is how the job gets done. So we started learning how to do that. They put me under the wings of a Dutch attorney, and he was supposed to show me how it's done. And I said, all right. And he started taking me around the room. And to my surprise, he was speaking only in French to all of these older white men that I was being introduced to. And so since I don't speak French, I just watched their expressions. And I don't know what he was saying to them in French, but the looks on their faces changed from a normal face to a changed expression to almost a look of terror. So I don't know what he was saying to them, but he let it be known that I was there and that I was going to let it known that we were coming to introduce the concept of reparations to the United Nations so that we could get assistance for that. So one woman came up to me during this time and was asking me, well, Mrs. Abubakar, what brings you to Geneva? And I told her, and I let reparations come out, and she forgot herself. She said, whoa, wait till the State Department hears about this. So we went through a lot of changes. I did, especially getting started. Another thing they did in the beginning, and I'm sharing this history with you because we have not written a book yet on all of these things. So I want you young people out there to know this, and I want the people that are already working with the people of African descent unit to know some of the changes we went through. All right, we were so interested in getting in and learning what there was to know until we went through other people that are already certified and already acting NGOs. I remember one day I went in as an Asian Chinese man. Can you believe that? That's how anxious we were to get into the UN and learn something about what the procedures are. And the guards didn't pay me any attention. And so I went right in. during my research during that time, met Dr. Y.N. Cly, and he was head of an NGO group called IRAM for short, International Human Rights for Americans and Minority Group. So we met each other's acquaintance. He was invited to our home in Atlanta, and he and my husband, Silas Muhammad, sitting right next to me, got a chance to get acquainted and work together on how we were going to approach the UN also. So my husband's going to share with you some of the details that have not been mentioned already. But I do want to emphasize again that we need to continue this work that we have started. It's been told to you the different seminars that we have attended. And I thank you again, United Nations, for those opportunities. And we want to continue this kind of effort. The seminars were picked in such a manner as to facilitate what we were trying to accomplish. For instance, when we met in Santiago, Chile, and I believe Dr. Bengoa was behind this selection also, it was because it was home to the Garifunas or the Garifnas. And this is a picture of Jose Bengoa during those times. And he's out of Santiago, Chile himself. He's a professor at their lead university there. Professor Bengoa picked Santiago, Chile because of the Garifunas. Now, why? It's because the Garifunas came from Africa, and they were scheduled to be slaves in Honduras or somewhere there. But there was a bad storm, and their slave boat was destroyed. Yeah. And they just landed on the shores with just enough tools or whatever they found to survive. But they were a people from Africa, of African descent, but they never were slaves. So it shows you the different things that different groups of us have had to go through. The people in Honduras, the government let them have that land that they were on, and they were there about 200 years. Now, during that course, when we were going back and forth to the UN, we did hear from the Garifunas, and they were currently having problems. So because of these hookups we had made, we were able to get together and share some of those problems. The problem they were having at the time was that their land base right on the ocean was very valuable. And they were being given offers of that you can't refuse, you know, sign or you're leaving the planet, basically. But it's this kind of thing that the UN helped us do. It hooked us up with other people, as the UN says, who have similarly situated situations and problems. Another example of that was when we met in La Ceiba, Santiago, Chile. We've been told already that they had this underground tunnel that they went through, and all of the horrors that involved. And again, it was a chance to connect us with those of similarly situated people that are throughout the slavery diaspora. So that's what we want to keep in mind when we focus in on what Afro-descendants should mean to all of us. We are speaking out, and we are giving the plights of all of us throughout the slavery diaspora. There's near 250 million of us, and we have endured different situations. For instance, the people in Brazil, their problems are totally different from ours in the United States. But we have this common background that the United Nations recognize. We are people of African descent with different backgrounds. And my husband and I put together a definition to describe as many of the common things that we have suffered. And we left it as a working definition. We were already told by Brazilian people of African descent that they will probably be adding something to our definition. But that's for the future. And I'm glad to see this work continuing now so that in the future we can grow together. And we do that with your help, United Nations. Thank you. I'm going to let my husband share the rest of this.
Well, to begin with,
Wait, is it on? Yeah, okay.
Yes,
the
it's on.
experts at the UN asked me if there are other people in the US who thought as I did. I said, yes. The experts of the UN told me, bring them out here with you. So we will know that you are not the only one asking for reparations or to correct your situation. Well, with that statement told to me by the UN, I came back to the USA and I made mention of that statement to my wife and to others. We were successful in gaining the Dorothy Lewis, Kalonji, several people, a brother from
Osiris, Akilah. Osiris. Yeah,
Osiris.
right. Mm-hmm.
And I took him out to the UN with me, as well as Osiris Akabela and Dorothy Lewis and Kalonji. I took them out to the UN with me, as well as I broadcast that statement made to me by the UN on the news in America. I made mention of that statement to come out to the UN with me, all the people. I told my wife to invite Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Have you been cut off? Something happened. Hmm?
You're okay. We can see you and hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I told my wife to invite Minister Farrakhan to come out to the UN with me, and he can represent us all. My wife visited with Minister Farrakhan and invited him and invited the whole group to come out to the UN with me. He declined. But out of that, the Million Man March was born. I cannot help but think that I had something to do with the Million Man March. Though I did not speak at the Million Man March, I was not actually invited to speak at the Million Man March. But I felt neglected out of it. He's taken the idea of the UN and demonstrating it in
Yeah.
America. The
Well, it's like
Million
a-
Man March should have been around the UN, not the US. Hmm?
You still on?
Yeah. That's about all I want to say about that.
Okay. If I may add, and we can't see anything, so can you see and hear us?
Yes, we can see and hear you. We can see.
All right.
Messenger Muhammad was trying
Okay.
to collect us all together, not just America. He was after the black people that were brought over here, scattered all over the diaspora, as well as the US. Those people are just like we are here in America. They need to be woken up. They are lost too. We were lost from our original nationality. Well, recently, you were told that your nationality now is Afrodescendant. And my mind is on how can we celebrate Afrodescendant, a new nation? What would be a good idea for a celebration for a people for 400 years have lost their original identity? And to receive an identity Afro-descendant should be publicized, should be a big to-do, a big thank you. We have a nation, a nationality again. What can we do to celebrate our new nationality, Afro-descendants? This is what the messenger Elijah Muhammad was after. He was not the father, he was the mother of us.
Went off again.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad. You and Queen Muhammad, Harriet Abubakar.
Mhm.
What I'm gathering in the notes that I make is that you starting in early in the 90s of 89, and that time you were in the UN when others were not there. And then
I started in the UN in 92.
Yes.
92.
Yes, sir. And now to this day in 2024, in the permanent form, there are hundreds now rallying for reparations and supporting the recognition and identification as Afro-descendant people. So we're honored of your work, and we recognize your work as pioneers for the establishment not only of this forum, but the many mandates that are established and have been written by the United Nations. And it's noted, Queen Mashaki Muhammad, for the continued regional support as a recommendation for this forum. And also, Mr. Muhammad has noted that there needs to be a global and a huge celebration for the identity of Afro-descendants being recognized as a people, as a nation of people. That is a key point for recognition, is recognition by not only the people, but other nations of the world need to recognize the coming of Afro-descendant people back to the world stage. At this time, we're going to have more time to open up for discussion, but we have a special guest that we want to give the time now to, who is here, Mr. Eric Phillips, who is a key person in the reparations struggle. He is the chairman of the Guyana Reparations Committee, an executive member of the African Cultural and Development Association, member of CARICOM Reparations Commission, and president of the African Business Roundtable, which is focused on economic issues. At this time, I'd like to bring him forward as a panelist. Thank you very much for attending, Mr. Phillips. You now have the floor.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. Bayete to everyone who is here, and especially to the Honorable Silas Muhammad and his beautiful queen. I am in Guyana. I leave tomorrow to go to Geneva, where I will be part of the Guyana delegation, but also representing myself as an Afro-descendant. And that is the role I choose to speak today. But greetings from CARICOM. The daily lived experiences of over 180 million Afro-descendants in Latin America and the Caribbean, of over 50 million Afro-descendants in North America, of over 10 million Afro-descendants in the European diaspora, and close to 1 billion Africans on the continent of Mother Africa bear stark, visible, and horrific witness to the centuries of crimes against humanity, African humanity, the collective punishment of the first people on earth, pre-calculated genocide of Afro-descendants, and the public policy of purposeful underdevelopment by European nations and their accomplices, some Caucasian, some African, as well as global corporations with their ruthless extractive philosophies. All of this, of course, blessed by the church, which perpetuated the belief that Africans and Afro-descendants were soulless and were not born in the image of God. During these centuries of ecclesiastical legal bondage, which began with the Catholic Church's first papal bull in 1452, known as Dum Diversus, Africa and Afro-descendants suffered the world's first nuclear bomb called chattel slavery. This papal bull gave the church approval to authorize European rulers to enslave African people and to seize their property and to become property. The African man, woman, and child were bequeathed the most insidious legacies of hate, genocide, poverty, and cultural destruction. This first nuclear bomb of chattel slavery destroyed and tried to destroy African culture, African family structures, African institutions, African culture, African growth, African history, African pride, and African economic development. This first nuclear bomb was followed by a second nuclear bomb called racism. this is a highly immoral, dangerous production of thoughts that promote the idea that people of African descent are inhuman. This was propagated by philosophers, scientists, clergymen, and governments to mask the scientific facts that we were and are human and Earth's first children. You see, these powerful voices had to create the perception that we are subhuman to justify treating us as property or chattel. And their efforts succeeded in the most horrific and lasting possible ways, as we see today. Today, this legacy of racism remains insidiously masked in our global political and economic systems, where it is amplified to promote, nurture, and reward African underdevelopment, and for opportunistic global and local entities called sovereign states or global corporations to continue to exploit African sovereignty and Afrodescendants under the guise of the sanctity of contracts and international law. This is how the new strategic clash of civilizations is unfolding, blessed by the economic gods who control the largest economies. Tragically, because Afrodescendants and continental Africans continue to ignore with great peril that there has been and continues to be a historical and ongoing clash of civilizations, we are at great peril. Yes, Black is beautiful, and this is a romantic slogan that we use, but this slogan is not used outside global Africa. We often, as Afro-descendants and people of African descent, help others to romanticize our stigmas. We seem to have forgotten the General Act of the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, which means that after emancipation and the great marketing hullabaloo that there was an abolition of slavery, that 14 countries, Austria, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, the Ottoman Empire, Portugal, Russia, Spain, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the United States sat around a table and divided Africa with no African leaders present. This continues today, where our affairs are decided by others, with us not participating. The Berlin Conference was and is the quintessential clash of civilizations, where the victors divided up the loot of African sovereignty, African humanity, and African civilization. Many now claim that the great accomplishments of Africans were done by them or by aliens. What was the motive of the conference that took place in Berlin? The main objective of the Berlin Conference was to set up international rules for making claims to African lands and to minimize strife between European powers. European colonization in Africa was motivated by economic exploitation, strategic national interests, religious and cultural motivations, and national pride. Afro-descendants, because of our inability to have unified, holistic understanding of the geopolitics and the cultural, racial, and developmental realities of the world, remain largely outside the systems of economic power. So I congratulate this forum in trying to bring unity among Afro-descendants. This third permanent forum of people of African descent or Afro-descendants must result in a fully funded permanent working group to focus on the great primordial debt owed to Africa and the global Afrodescendant nation of peoples. The theme of the upcoming third session of the Permanent Forum is the Second International Decade for People of African Descent, addressing systemic racism, reparatory justice, and sustainable development. The first decade had a predictable fatal flaw: no funding. If the strategy was for the first decade to have great success, then an appropriate structure with appropriate human and monetary sources would have been put in place. Rather, the United Nations inadvertently expected nations who were signatories to the resolution for the International Decade to act responsibly and with financial resolve to address the funding of national programs. Only one country did, and that's Guyana, where I now am sitting. To have expected nations that still aggressively and passively fight the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, as we saw on the 20th anniversary in 2021, to have expected them to take the first decade seriously and to fund it is a naivety that is surpassed only by the hypocrisy of these nations. It is therefore automatic that there should be a second decade for people of African descent. There were two separate international decades of the world's indigenous peoples. The first was 1995 to 2005. The second was 2005 to 2014. So we expect, since our suffering is equivalent or so much more, because it went on for centuries, that there should be an automatic second decade. So justifiably, a second decade should be fully funded at the United Nations level with matching funds from the Church of England, who just said they're putting up 100 million to £1 billion, should be funded by the Catholic Church because they've passed the first papal bull, and the 14 signatory nations present at the Durban Conference of 1884 and 85 that enabled this new racism to continue in its inhuman extraction and exploitation of Africa, exploitation of Afrodescendants and their sovereign nations in the Caribbean. Some of these enablers have exhibited incredible gall, belligerence, and audacity to fight the DDPA with doublespeak, triple lies, and by implementing quadruple trade laws that are detrimental to Africa and diaspora African states, even as the ICJ, benumbed and politically helpless to call genocide what it is, genocide. The theme of today's Afrodescendant Nation side event is important. It is reparations, recognition of Afrodescendants as a people in the second international decade of people of African descent. Recognizing Afrodescendants as a people is one of the most significant accomplishments that can be result from and during the second decade. By the way, in 2018, the World Bank issued a report entitled Afrodescendants in Latin America Towards a Framework for Inclusion. One of the key recommendations of this document was that Afro-descendants should constitutionally be treated as a separate people. So this side event here today can be seen as a precursor to the debate that should be had in Geneva and in every Afro-descendant community and within the permanent forum. So I thank both the Afrodescendant Nation and the All for Reparations and Emancipation Group for inviting me to share the space with other distinguished speakers. May our ancestors and our current generations achieve true recognition, dignity, and equitable, action-oriented opportunities for cultural, economic, political, spiritual, and social development. I leave by amplifying the theme of the International Decade for People of African Descent: recognition, justice, development. Let's recognize the crime and the criminals. Let's have justice for the crimes against our humanity. And let development be through reparations, sustainable development for Africa, Afro-descendants, and in every nation of the earth. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Thank you very much for that well-planned and well-executed delivery from CARICOM and from Guyana, supporting recognition of Afro-descendants, reparations, reparatory justice, and the lingering effects and impact from the Catholic Church and other benefactors such as corporations who continue to benefit from Afro-descendant people as a result of slavery, and also the impact that it directs toward Africa as well. Thank you so much. I hope that you stay on as we have time for any final questions, and our delegation will be leaving as well for Geneva. We hope that we can connect and break bread and have further dialogue on how we can unify with you, with Guyana and the rest of CARICOM.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to introduce our next panelist. She is the founder of CURE and AFRE. She started us in the United Nations, that is Miss Ida Hakeem. She is the founder of the organization, and she has been a diligent aid and support for guiding us through the United Nations. She guided us in places that we could not go and was able to understand various spaces that would stop us, halt us, or would advance us. She has been there since the beginning. She has been providing interventions and supporting the Honorable Salis Muhammad and Queen Mashaki Muhammad and other members of AFRE for over 30 years, facilitating interventions, both oral and written. She continues to be an emeritus advisor to AFRE. We welcome her and we thank you, Madam Ida Hakeem.
Thank you so much, Ishmael. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. I thank you very much. Greetings to everyone. I had hoped today to handle two questions. One would be, have Americans and white Americans seen the efforts of Afro-descendants to identify self? Have we seen it? And do Americans, white Americans, support the movement for reparations? I want to give a quick look at the history because that can help you understand how CURE came to be. I married an Afro-descendant man named Khalid Hakim, a wonderful person. And he was listening to certain leaders, and that led me to contact Mr. Salis Muhammad, asking, what can I do to help? How can I help? And the answer came back, you can support reparations. And at that point, I knew very little about reparations, so I began to study. I went to Queen Mother Dorothy Benton Lewis, wonderful person again, and got information from her. I went to a conference, and at the same time, I began to look for other white people who were speaking in favor of reparations. And I found some like mine. In 1992, Mr. Muhammad asked me to create a non-governmental organization with consultative status. So I went to the friends that I had gathered, and we began creating Caucasians United for Reparations and Emancipation. We wrote 2 books, we held meetings, elected officers, and we began doing national radio and television interviews in support of reparations. So we got quite a lot of attention and gained some members. CURE applied for status with the UN, and after 5 years of focused effort, we had 120 members in the US, Europe, and Australia, and we were granted status in 1997. And I also want to talk about the very first interventions at the very first meeting that we went to. The first act of CURE was to facilitate a written communication from Mr. Muhammad and Attorney Abu Bakr to the subcommission. That written communication was submitted, and within a few weeks, we received an invitation to attend the Working Group on Minorities. And I want to say the names of these men who helped us, just out of appreciation. Professor Asbjørn Eid of Norway, Professor Jose Bengoa of Chile, Professor Mustafa Mahedi of Morocco, Professor Miguel Alfonso Martinez of Cuba. Thank you to all of them, and thank you to Mr. Bengoa. What happened at our first meeting at the Working Group on Minorities directly applies to our prayer today, so I would like to tell you about it. Mr. Muhammad and Attorney Abu Bakr's spoken interventions and the replies they received made it clear to Mr. Muhammad that African Americans had no collective recognition within the UN system, and it was presumed that they had successfully assimilated into the American culture. That came as an absolute shock to Mr. Muhammad. Later that afternoon, in a private setting, he spoke about it, and he wept. He said, according to the UN, we don't exist. With this heartbreaking truth in mind, Mr. Muhammad and Attorney Abu Bakr made it clear to the experts of the Working Group on Minorities that African Americans want UN recognition as a people. Mr. Muhammad asked the working group to grant the slave descendants a forum where they could meet and establish an identity, and the forums were granted. As we have spoken about, there was a forum in, well, I wasn't spoken about, but there was a forum in Geneva, there was a forum in Honduras, and there was a forum in Peru. These were meetings with other Afrodescendants from all around South, Central, North America. It was at the very first forum in Honduras where the definition was written. And it was written, Attorney Abu Bakr and Mr. Muhammad brought me a piece of paper with the definitions, and I hand copied it down, and they took it to the rest of the group, and it was well received. It's still a working definition, but it was very well received, and it was discussed again in Peru a couple of years later. Now, let me go on then to the first question. Have Americans seen the efforts of Afrodescendants to identify self? Have we noticed the pain and suffering caused by having no other identity at all other than slavery descendant? That's your identity. And if our eyes are open, we have. For many of us white people, ignorance is the issue. White Americans living in majority white communities, associating with very few Afrodescendants, learning very little Black history in school, are informed only by the major media, which really offers no accurate information at all. The news media in the 1960s did not cover the Black nationalist movement in a positive manner. Instead, the media and the government focused on civil rights, not human rights. Even though we were given negative news on the Black nationalist movement, quite a few of us were supportive of it because its spirit was extraordinary. It was an inspiring coming to life, and we could feel it. It was evident. Even though I had no involvement with the Black community at that time, I knew it was significant. The raised fists at the Olympics, Muhammad Ali, these things inspired my heart. And the new spirit could be heard in the music. It was everywhere in the culture. We want to do for self. We want to educate our own children. We want to be in charge of our own lives. So it was there for us to see. And there were a number of Black leaders who took the people's mind toward liberation and self-determination, at the most significant being the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He played a significant role in awakening the spirit of the people, and his impact is still living today in the Afrodescendant Nation. As you may know, the US government arrested, imprisoned, and assassinated leaders of the Black nationalist movement. This program was called COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program. It was an assault on the Afrodescendants' attempt to self-identify and achieve self-determination and human rights. And it certainly was a violation of Article 27 of the ICCPR. After that inspiring Black nationalist movement declined, the liberation message was further damaged by gangster rap, which was attributable more to the record executives than to the artists. And such is the case today with today's music. The music is programming designed to fill private prisons with Black men and women. Now, also, I want to take a look at white supremacy. We have been told since the foundation of America that our white culture is superior somehow. The American system is built on white supremacy, and that concept is still woven within the system. I'm not saying that it's in the hearts of white people thinking I'm supreme. It is not, but it's woven in the system. It's found in policing, in the judicial system, in the private prisons, in the educational system, the financial system, in healthcare. Many different systems offer an advantage to white America. It may be a hidden advantage or a subtle one, but it's there.
Mhm.
Civil rights achieved some assimilation. Affirmative action achieved a little. Today, we have diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that achieves a little. and all the efforts toward fairness and inclusion are appreciated, but they have in no way diminished the desire of Afro-descendants for recognition as peoples, self-determination, and reparations. And that brings us to the question, do Americans support the movement for reparations? My answer is that some do and many do not. In American schools, there is not an accurate representation of Black history. Many Americans simply do not know of the atrocities, the intentional psychological damage, the sabotage of gains made toward self-determination. And my hope, my personal hope and desire is to bring the truth to light in a way that the people realize reparations will be a positive for all Americans. I would like to persuade the young Americans who supported Black Lives Matter that this is the way to support Black lives. Of course, Black Lives Matter. Let's have a listen. Let's listen to what Black people would like to do. Let's listen to the calls for self-determination and for reparations. The United States became wealthy due to slavery, and every citizen benefited, including the ones who got here yesterday. In addition, institutions, and thank you so much for mentioning the Roman Catholic Church, institutions and businesses that gained wealth from slavery owe this debt. And frankly, this is an opportunity for them to bring an end to the evil that has been done in the name of profit. Afro-descendants in the U.S. have been seeking collective identity for many years, many times, seeking self-determination. Our prayer is that this working group will recognize Afro-descendants as a new people, born anew through their own will with the help of the UN. They have the right to determine their own future and destiny and be fully compensated for more than 400 years of utter exploitation, terrorism, discrimination, and on and on and on and on. The crimes are countless, and this must come to an end. And that is my statement for you, and I appreciate being invited and being able to speak. And thank you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you, Madam Ida Hakeem, Idam Lawrence. Thank you for sharing that perspective, the historical perspective of Cure, AFRE, giving a perspective and or possibly a directive to whites and how to view the struggles of Afro-descendant people and the history, and to be courageous enough to learn and support. We appreciate that. You will stay around for open panel if there are any questions. We thank you again for all that you do, and honored to have you on this panel as well as
Honored to be here, Ishmael.
thank you so much. As a part, Madam Hakeem talked about self-determination. One of the most pure and modern examples of self-determination that we've seen in this recent time is that of the birth of the Afrodescendant Nation. I think that is something that is resonating now before my eyes and throughout the world. And as we go to Geneva, that'll resonate again as this next presenter speaks to us and exemplifies her work and illuminates her work, because she's very, very passionate about what she does and what she wants for Afro-descendant people. Our next speaker is Dr. Akilah Mukarram, who is the president of the Afrodescendant Nation. And the Afrodescendant Nation is born out of the desire and the will and manifestation of the need for our people to be recognized and unified across cultural, religious, political, and ideological differences, and to focus on the governing matters at hand. She is passionate about that for our people. She's an educator. She's a leader for social justice. She wears many, many hats. and she wants the best for our people. I want to thank you, and we are honored to have you here, Madam President, Dr. Akilah Mukarram.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
really appreciate being here today. And I'm a little unorthodox, so bear with me. So I invite you today, our panelists and our listening audience, to take a journey with me. Let's put ourselves back in Africa as our ancestors were. Put ourselves in our ancestors' shoes for a moment. In your mind, picture yourself enjoying being an African in your own country, on your land, with your family, and with your people. Then someone comes along, comes to your land, they capture you. They stuff you on a ship like sardines in a can with more of your people. You're sailing for days, nights, weeks, chained, shackled, not able to go to the bathroom in private, having to relieve yourself where you lay stuffed on the ship. You arrive in a strange land, America, and are sold away from your family members to different slave owners. You have suffered through chattel slavery, treated as an animal, worse than an animal. The white Caucasian people treated their dog better than you. Your dignity as a people was stripped, lost. Your name beaten out of you and forced to take on the slave master's name. Your language, mother tongue you spoke in Africa, was stripped, lost, and you were forced to speak the slave master's English instead. Your culture and religion were stripped, and you were forced and coerced to assimilate into the American culture and take on Christianity as your religion. Generation after generation,
I think are we frozen?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam President, we'll give her a chance if she can get back on. We'll give her an opportunity to get back on. Okay. If what we'll do in the sake of time and moving forward, if the panel will agree, I'm just gonna talk through, and if she gets back on, we'll let her come in and we'll move forward. But next, I guess I should move next because we're moving in the last half hour of our presentation. At this time, I'd like to introduce someone who has been very, very instrumental in coordinating this event, as well as she has been instrumental in coordinating the unity and gathering of Afro-descendant people at the National Reparations Conventions. She is also a governing board member of AFRE. She is a health expert on issues regarding health of Afro-descendant people, as well as a human rights activist, and that is Dr. Tahita Bronner. Madam Bronner, thank you so much. And if you I'd appreciate you to introduce yourself, but depending on where we are, if Madam President comes in, we'll move forward. But thank you so much, Madam. And we're, just to let everyone know, we're in the last half hour and we'll move right along. And hopefully we'll have some time to summarize final recommendations. If not, we'll do it on paper. Dr. Brown.
Thank you, sir. So I'll just start by giving you a little bit more about me. By background, I'm a naturopathic physician licensed in the state of Maryland, and I run a private practice specializing in holistic primary care medicine. And I want to address some of the unique health challenges faced by Afro-descendants that are deeply rooted in the legacy of plantation slavery and generational trauma. Now, the long-term impact of centuries of abuse, oppression, and terrorism have profound consequences on the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the Afro-descendant population as a whole. Now, the legacy of plantation slavery has left this lasting imprint on our health, from higher rates of chronic and avoidable diseases to disparities in access to healthcare, and the effects of generational trauma on our health are still felt today. So starting with chronic diseases, we are disproportionately affected by conditions such as type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease. And these disparities can be traced back to the conditions of slavery, where inadequate access to healthcare, harsh living conditions, and being forced to eat the worst of unhealthy food has all contributed to the development of these health disparities in the first place. And today, we continue to face significant disparities in access to quality healthcare due to a number of factors such as lack of health insurance, transportation issues, and plain old provider bias. And then regarding mental health disparities, the trauma of slavery coupled with ongoing discrimination and systemic racism has contributed to higher rates of mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety. The intergenerational transmission of trauma further exacerbates these challenges as the effects of these past injustices continue to be felt in the present, resulting in rising suicidal rates and often overlooked and silenced in the Black community. And then thirdly, I want to just touch on that Afro-descendants have experienced increased maternal and fetal mortality rates as well. So according to the most recent data, the maternal death rate for Black women is more than double that of white women, with 44 deaths per 100,000 live births compared to 17.9. And it's also 3 times the rate for Hispanic women at 12.6. So this week just so happens to be Black Maternal Health Week, April the 11th through the 17th, which was established to bring awareness to the challenges and barriers that Black mothers and babies experience in receiving maternal health care in the United States. So in conclusion, real quickly, the health challenges faced by Afro-descendants are so deeply rooted in the legacy of plantation slavery and generational trauma that addressing these challenges requires a comprehensive, holistic approach that first acknowledges the impact of slavery and then offers effective solutions. So in addition to the recommendations already stated, we would also ask that in the forthcoming second decade on people of African descent, that the United States or United Nations and the Permanent Forum, number one, acknowledge Afro-descendants as a people and advocate for reparations, restitution, repair, and holistic healing that addresses the underlying causes of these health disparities to achieve optimal health outcomes. We ask that the UN support and sponsor specialized teams of healthcare experts to organize informative healthcare seminars and develop initiatives that directly address health disparities suffered by Afro-descendants, because our health is our greatest wealth. And it's my passion, and I would love to do anything to assist in that area. And then on the subject of reparations and repair, the Afrodescendant Nation is on the move. We are taking the National Reparations Convention around the country and uniting the reparations movement as we go. And this year, we will be in Washington, D.C., May the 17th through the 20th at the historic Lincoln Temple United Church. And for more information, please visit our website and get your tickets at www.nationalreparationsconvention.com. And one of our highly anticipated keynote speakers based in DC is attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz. He is lead counsel for Black Lawyers for Justice and national reparations conductor of the Afrodescendant Nation and lead civil counsel for Rankin County, Mississippi Goon Squad victims. And he's also the former national chairman for New Black Panther Party. And most recently, he's been doing a lot of great work there in Mississippi. So we're going to hear from him by audio presentation, and thanks for listening. I hope that I am sharing my sound. Let's just double check. All right. And you can see the screen, right?
Greetings to you, to this permanent forum on people of African descent. This distinguished body at this UN side event, leading to the permanent forum on people of African descent. My name is Malik Shabazz. I am an attorney, and I am the lead counsel for Black Lawyers for Justice, that nationally known human rights and civil rights legal firm that is making great waves all over the United States of America in this hour. I am honored to serve as the National Reparations Conductor for the Honorable Silas Muhammad and the Afrodescendant Nation, who are striving hard this year, as they have and we have been every year, fighting for full and complete reparations for our people, Afrodescendants in the hells of North America, otherwise known as the Black man and the Black woman. Reparations and our advocacy for reparations, I cannot tell you more in this brief message. That the hour is critical and the time is critical that we accelerate the pace for recognition for our cause, recognition for reparations. And we must accelerate this cause quick, fast, and a hurry, because time is running short. I'm advocating that we must organize if we truly want to be recognized. That we must organize like we never have before, with a fervency that we never had before. That we must organize with a pace of intensity that we never have before, if we will ever have a dream of not only being recognized in the world affairs for the cause of reparations, but actually achieving this goal in our lifetime of full and complete reparations. We must be about organizing by any means necessary as we approach the National Convention of the Afrodescendant Nation in Washington, D.C., May 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th. I'm pleased to report to this international body that there will be over 40 to 50 reparations organizations from around the United States of America at our national convention in May of this year, May 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th. And we are at this United Nations forum, and we understand that Brother Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, that his birth date or earth date is May 19th, and we want everyone to know, to pay attention to, and to support the fact that the Afrodescendant Nation, the Honorable Silas Muhammad, Dr. Cornel West, that great presidential candidate, his vice presidential candidate, the first Muslim woman on a U.S. presidential ticket ever, the leader of Black Lives Matter, Melina Abdullah, her, Dr. Cornel West, they are joining with the Honorable Silas Muhammad. And they will be here with your brother Malik Shabazz and all of the top scholars in the nation, the top activists in the nation, the young people. We're coming together to take a final stand in this reparations fight. We have come to put up a final stand in the hells of North America to once again say that organization is going to be the key to winning this fight. If the powers that be are going to bend to our will, if the United States government is going to bend to our will, if the corporations and companies that have robbed us, if they are going to bend to our will, if state legislatures are going to bend to our will, and make no mistake about it, if we're going to achieve reparations, we will have to be an irresistible force that will bend the powers of this world to our will. Then we are going to have to be organized like never before.
But why is showing?
And so I close to you and say, in the words of Brother Stokely Carmichael, Brother Kwame Ture, that organization is going to be the decisive factor as we move forward in this year. We must organize like never before, and we must take action. We must take action against the criminal companies and corporations and CEO bloodsuckers that have robbed our people. They must have to feel the pain. The robbers of our people are going to have to feel the pain if we are even going to dream of them bending to our will. No powers in the United States of America, no powers on the planet, white supremacy, imperialism, Zionism, colonialism, none of it is going to be moved unless it is moved by a coherent and consciously, fiercely organized masses of our people, 40 to 50 million Afro-descendants, Black people in America, 2 billion African Black people around this planet. That is the power that can get us where we have to go. It's the only real power we have. We don't have the aircraft carriers. We don't have the ships. We don't have the nuclear weapons. We don't have the military power. But we have the human power, the material power, the power of our people, the power of our resources, the power of the force of justice that predominates, reigns, and abides throughout the 76 quintillion miles of the universe. We have that power with us and the power of our history. So I leave you, sisters and brothers. Thank you for listening to me. I say we must organize. That's what as the conductor, that's all I know how to do in this hour. All I know how to do is to go after this enemy and have this enemy to pay a price. That's what you're seeing and hearing about our work here against the notorious no-good goon squad, criminal white deputies, criminals that torturizing our people. But when you hear them going to jail and prison for 40 years and 27 years and 20 years and a total of 132 years, then I just want you to humbly know that Attorney Malik Shabazz, if you ask him to get in the reparations fight, that at the end of the day, he wants justice. And those that are with me, we want justice and we must have it now. We don't just want recognition for justice, we want justice. We want results. And then we have to have full and complete reparations or die trying in the process. And we can't be the only ones dying in self-defense. I honor you. I thank you for listening to these words on this special UN Forum for People of African Descent, this UN side event. I am your brother and your servant, Malik Shabazz, and I hope that I have represented the Afrodescendant Nation in this forum here. I hope that I have represented the Afrodescendant Nation and the Honorable Silas Muhammad well. I will see you in Washington at our national convention, straight ahead, by any means necessary, no turning back, full and complete reparations, freedom or death, and black power. Assalamu alaikum.
Dr. Bronner, thank you so much. Thank you, Attorney Malik Shabazz, for that passionate and well-delivered message to this panel, as well as to the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. I believe we have Madam President back on. Thank you,
sir.
so much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you for
And
getting
thank
back
you.
with us. I guess it works out. Let's see, with our time that you could round us out. But what I do
Okay.
want to, before you finish, I want to, Mr. Phillips, I just want to preface him after the president. There are questions coming up about Haiti and CARICOM. I just want to ask you to respond to that after the president, to give you some time to reflect. But I want to make sure that we respect the people who are putting questions and answers, Q&A, and we want to respect them as participants, but give you time to reflect on that. Thank you so much. Madam President, thank you again.
You're welcome, and thank you. So I will not go back from the beginning. I hope that you can center with me, take a deep breath in and out, and we'll just pick up where I left off. I started to mention that your culture and religion was stripped, and you were forced and coerced to assimilate into the American culture and take on Christianity as your religion. Generation after generation, for 400 plus years, your families have suffered from the lingering effects of slavery through systemic racial discrimination and Jim Crow laws, among other human rights violations. When does it stop? When we unite as a people with our new nationality, Afrodescendant. It identifies us globally as a people whose ancestors were victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. Our nationality, Afrodescendant, connects us to all our people in the slavery diaspora for a total of more than 250 million. Most of us here in the United States have not yet realized that. Our dignity as a people was stripped, lost, our names were beaten out of us, we were forced to take on the slave master's name. Our language was stripped from us. Our mother tongue that we spoke in Africa, gone. And we were forced to speak the slave master's English instead. It is to the United States' advantage to keep our nationality Afro-descendant away from African Americans here in the States. Because once African Americans here in the States realize what our nationality Afro-descendant can do for us, they may decide they want a sovereign nation for Afro-descendants. They may want the Afro-descendant nation to be their sovereign nation, just like the Jewish people wanted their sovereign nation and got it, Israel. Look at what their reparations has done for them and continuing to do for them as Jewish people, Israelites. We have suffered enough physically, mentally, emotionally, and economically from the lingering effects of the act of slavery, condoned and legalized by the American government. Through this suffering, we were dehumanized and made into a nothingness people. Our language stripped, our culture destroyed, our religion stripped, our dignity as a people taken away. We were lost from the knowledge of who we once were before slavery. We have now arisen as a new people, people of African descent, whose African ancestors endured slavery, in which the lingering effects continue with us to this day, being raped, murdered, and traumatized throughout our sojourn here in America. We lacked a nationality that identified us as a collective people throughout the slavery diaspora in this world, who had become a new people from our experiences that we lingered from through slavery of our foreparents. Over the past 469 years, Afro-descendants' identity here in America has changed from nigger to Negro, colored, Afro-American, Black, African-American. So in an article on the United Nations Economic and Social Council, I would like to read some information for you from that. This was dated from La Ceiba, Honduras. It's a report of the regional seminar on Afro-descendants in the Americas, March 2002. At the regional seminar, this is in the introduction, on Afro-descendants in the Americas in La Ceiba, Honduras, March 21st through the 24th, 2002. 47 Afro-descendant representatives from 19 countries participated in the seminar. The International Human Rights Law Group and Inter-American Institute for Human Rights were also represented. So on page 5, number 9, the item number 9, it states, Mr. Silas Muhammad, Cure AFRE, United States of America, gave his definition of Afro-descendants as peoples who had their roots in Africa, had been forcibly transported to the Americas for slavery, and had experienced the loss of their original identity, language, and religion, and discrimination. So we, the Afro-Descendant Nation, urge the distinguished officers of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent to recommend to the United Nations that our new nationality, Afro-descendant definition, be recognized as the Honorable Silas Muhammad had provided it in that seminar in La Ceiba, Honduras. The term Afro-descendants refers to descendants of peoples who were forcibly dispossessed of their homeland, Africa, were transported to the Americas and the slavery diaspora for the purpose of enslavement, were subjected to slavery, were subjected to forced mixed breeding and rape, have experienced through force the loss of mother tongue, culture, and religion, and or have experienced racial discrimination due to lost ties or partially lost ties from their original identity. We also urge that the Afrodescendant Nation should receive a seat in the United Nations as a part of their equity initiative so that our voices can be heard and we will not be overlooked. And we would like to also urge and impress upon the distinguished officers of the Permanent Forum that you grant us Afro-descendants because we want to receive a specific forum or an agenda item. Please grant us a specific forum or an agenda item at the second international decade of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, for providing this side event for us to speak before we travel to Geneva.
Madam President, Walaikum Salam, Madam President, Dr. Akilah, thank you for that powerful message, and thank you for allowing us not to forget the emotional trauma that we experience that leads to what we are doing today. And thank you for providing those recommendations to the Permanent Forum. We're after our time, if we can all agree to round up, finish no later, let's see, what time do we have here? That we can go on for maybe another 20, no more than 30 minutes, but I want to allow our special guest, Mr. Dr. Phillips from CARICOM, to respond to some of these questions, because I think what people need to understand, Haiti are Afro-descendant people. They were colonized by the French. They lost their mother tongue, lost their culture. They are Afro-descendant people. And currently the world and this hemisphere has its eyes on the island of Haiti and the Haitian people. And Mr. Phillips, would you respond to CARICOM's position and activity toward the support of the people of Haiti?
Thank you very much. Haiti is a foreign affairs issue within CARICOM, so I'm not empowered to speak on the Prime Minister's behalf. I do know they had a team of eminent persons who were engaged with the Haitians for quite a while. And as you said, Haiti is very critical to the Afrodescendant Nation. It is the largest country in CARICOM, probably with about 70% of the population. I think CARICOM is trying to go to Haiti with clean hands in a very dirty historical situation that started since 1804. I think if you read the book, America Has a Lot to Pay to Haiti, written by Roger Prasad, where you read about the Louisiana Purchase, you'll see that Haiti is very instrumental in America being a land that starts in the Atlantic and ends in the Pacific. It may have more oil than Venezuela. It has copper, it has gold, it has other assets. And so what we're seeing since 1804 is Western domination of Haiti, because they didn't want Haiti to succeed because it was the first Black republic and it defeated the British and others. As a matter of fact, almost 500,000 Africans died to free Haiti. So it's US strategy that actually is being put in front of the table with the Transitional Council. CARICOM is just a facilitator, but it's really, we have to be honest about this. This is US policy, they're funding it. Many of the citizens of Guyana and the Caribbean do not agree with the policy. We have a transitional council which has its own internal problems based on personality and power. And what Guyana and Haiti and well, people of the Caribbean need to do, including our prime ministers, is to ensure that Haiti is on a path of independence in the true sense. I don't understand personally the philosophy of not speaking to barbecue, because he is armed and was others, and if you're sending barbecue, which is one of the things that is not on the table. So I have questions, I empathize. Haiti should be a priority. We saw what happened to Aristide when he asked for reparations. He was ousted. We saw what happened with Daddy Doc and Baby Doc, which were supported by America to keep Haiti under their guide. So we have to hope that CARICOM has their own foreign policy, and that goal should be that Haiti is managed and ruled by Haitians with a Haitian philosophy that started in 1804. So I wish I could have spoken on behalf of the prime ministers. I don't have that privilege or authority. I have my own personal feelings, and I think Haiti, even within CARICOM, we have policies that are different that need to be reconciled, because there are brothers and sisters, and without Haiti, I mean, Haiti is a symbol of freedom and resistance and of Afrodescendant power. And so I think the permanent forum supposed to be a special committee on Haiti. And I just want to, in closing, add that one of the things that was reparations is that Africa needs to have a seat in the permanent in the Security Council. We don't. We need to have one of those 5 seats. That has to be part of what we look for also in the second international.
Yes, you're
indigenous people have been designed. So that's all I can offer. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Phillips. Thank you for giving our audience. We have cited there's been over 80 participants that we see that have gone in, and note that many of our participants have signed on from around the world, and they understand and we understand that there's a relationship between reparations for Afro-descendant people, and that the people of Haiti are part of that. And I just wanted to thank you again for that, the commentary. I hope it satisfies our guests' interests. If not, I'm sure there'll be more dialogue in the future. But at this time, in a round about, I want to go back to our early presenters, if they have any recommendations for this next period. Now, our members, I know Madam Dr. Tahita, she issued her recommendations. Madam President issued recommendations. I wanted to clarify those that did not, to have an opportunity to give recommendations, a recommendation or recommendation for the permanent forum in the second decade. And I will start.
Permanent forum, nothing to do with nothing else.
I want to, if Mr. Akilah Mukarram, is he still with us?
I guess he's gonna call you.
And I'll come back to him once he comes back on. But the Honorable Silas Muhammad, Mr. Muhammad, and Mrs. Harriet Abubakar, Queen Muhammad, I will give the floor to you.
Much emphasis is placed on Silas Muhammad, but I want you to know that Silas Muhammad has a wife Harriet Abubakar, who is an attorney and who does much of the work around here. Her mind is big, yeah. Since I have been back in the USA for about 2 years, I have had the feeling that if the Lost Foundation of Islam could come back together, Mr. Louis Farrakhan and Silas Muhammad, if we could come back together, we would be the voice of America. The Lost Foundation of Islam is the voice of Black people in America. If the Lost Foundation of Islam could come back together, we would be the voice of Black people in America. The Nation of Islam has been the voice of Black people in America.
That's the truth.
Since 1930.
Yeah.
We are split in the Nation of Islam because of Farrakhan and Silas Muhammad. What idea could you bring forward to cause us to come back together? If we come back together, Black people in the United States would come back together.
Mm-hmm. That would be wonderful.
Yes.
It would be wonderful.
Farrakhan and I are split over was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad the man or was he the woman?
That's not time.
This is something that I want you to think about, you officers to think about, and carry that back to Mr. Louis Farrakhan. I say that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was not the Messiah. Honorable Elijah Muhammad was Mary. He said that Honorable Elijah Muhammad is the Messiah. I disagree wholeheartedly. Honorable Elijah Muhammad was not the Messiah. He was Mary.
Thank you. I guess, Mr. Muhammad.
I would just like to add something. It is time. It's time, Minister Louis Farrakhan, for the two of you to set your personal differences aside and come together for the sake of your people. It's time for that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Rise above.
Thank you. What I will conclude with that for purposes of our forum is the need for our leadership to come together over and above our ideological differences for the sake of our people. That we are at a time where Black leaders must overcome our differences for the sake of the people who we lead. I think we can all agree on that, and that's a message that we must get out to all of our people. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum to all.
Thank you so much, sir.
It's good seeing all of you.
Thank you. We're honored to be seen with you. Thank you very much. Mr. Mukarram, Ajani, thank you so much. We are rounding up with final recommendations. And I know you had 1 or 2 or 3 recommendations for the permanent forum. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate the audience. I appreciate Mr. Muhammad and his wife, Harriet Abu Bakr Muhammad. I appreciate you for your work, and Dr. Tahita and the president and all of those panelists who participated. My only recommendation, as I know we have a cadre going out to the UN, is that our voice be heard and that they really live up to their UN uh, 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 their creed to say that there's human rights for everyone, everywhere. We have not had a chance to exercise our human rights in the United States of America or throughout the slavery diaspora. They destroyed our human rights, and we want to be restored, as it's so eloquently been stated, as our national identity, Afrodescendants. We suffer here even to have civil rights in the United States, but we want our true human rights. That's our recommendation, is that they establish a forum, as Mr. Muhammad had going forward, where Afrodescendants can express themselves and get reparatory repair and reparations for all those damages. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Hakeem Lawrence, did you have any final recommendations? Because I think the rest of the delegation will be headed to
Yes, sir.
Geneva and have an opportunity. This is an opportunity for those of this panel to share for recommendations that we will forward.
I certainly recommend another decade for the working group of people on people of African descent that most definitely deserve, and I would like to see it funded properly so that they can do the good work that they need to do. That would be up to the Human Rights Council, I'm guessing, or the General Assembly, but no, this group needs to be funded for another decade. And our prayer to them, of course, is that Afrodescendants have a permanent place on the agenda, as you said, or a working group or forum somewhere that all Afrodescendants from the diaspora can come together and speak again, as we did in Honduras and as we did in Peru. And we were waiting for the next forum when the UN was reorganized and all three bodies that were helping us were shut down. So this forum has been waiting to take place since 2006. My prayer is that this working group receives another decade, receives generous funding, and that Afrodescendants have a position where they can unify and become the people. It's a new people, a people being born. It's exciting in the earth that a new people is coming to life. It's exciting to me to see it happen. And, you know, my prayer is that they facilitate this and we can watch it and we can appreciate it. And finally be past that time period of colonization and slavery and have this debt paid.
Thank you all. It's been an honor to be with you at this panel. We want to thank the members of the Permanent Forum for allowing us to have this side event. We want to thank them for putting the forum together to receive us. And we look forward to a vigorous session, and that the outcome is robust and it gives birth to very serious executive actions that calls for reparations and reparatory justice to be immediately done, funded, and exercised. We thank you all. And Dr. Tahita, if you would end us out in that that movie again, or that presentation as we came in on, and the rest of you have a wonderful day. We thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you. Are you able to get it on? Thank you all. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you.